Today I'm going to talk about one of the most important aspects of the music world that we don't really hear much about. And that is music publishing and printing, where it all started and where it is now. And finally, I will tell you how you can publish your own scores in the easiest way. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Homing TV. So, as I said today, we are going on a journey through the history and evolution of music publishing and printing. But before we delve into the historical part, let's first talk about music publishing and their role in the musical world. In general, music publishers have two important tasks. The first is generating, producing, and distributing printed musical scores and parts, while also marketing the composer and their music, so people can find their music and perform them. And the second task is to ensure that the composer, songwriter, and other creators receive credit and royalties. However, this can also be on the artist's side. But if the music is published by publishers, then they can earn from 30 to 50% of the royalties, which is honestly a very high fee. Alright, now that we know their roles, let's talk about historical facts. And for that, we have to travel back in time to find the roots. An important era for music printing was the 15th century, since until then, the Catholic Church had quite the influence over many different aspects of people's lives, and that included music. They believed that liturgical words set to music would transcend the text to a higher level. And in order to share and spread the music, the scores had to be copied out by hand. However, this was a very hard and time-consuming process. The result was a highly decorated manuscript called the illuminated manuscript. If you are wondering what a manuscript is, it is basically a book, document, or a piece of music written by hand. The next evolution in music printing was woodblock printing. This method was actually invented in China during the Tang dynasty around the 8th century. But it was used quite later in Europe, around the 14th century, to print text on paper or animal skin membrane, which is called vellum. But as for music publishing, this method did not begin on a large scale until the middle of the 15th century, when mechanical techniques for printing music were first developed. In this technique, they would carve the music onto a flat piece of wood, spread ink on it, and lay it on a paper or vellum. This method was quite tricky, as the woodcutter had to write everything in reverse, so when ink was spread on the wood, it would be mirrored and correctly sit on the printing medium. A little bit later, around 1450, we have Johannes Gutenberg. He was an inventor, goldsmith, and printer who introduced the metal movable type printing in Europe. Gutenberg was the first to create his typepieces from an alloy of lead, tin, and antimony, and these materials remained the standard for the next 550 years. This method produced faster and cleaner results than woodblock printing. This type of printing was basically a puzzle of metal typepieces in which they had to be put together to replicate the manuscript, leading to typography and fonts. However, there were some issues with this technique. Because they were limited to the typesettings and fonts, you could not duplicate many details of manuscripts, and therefore music printing had to evolve and give birth to music engraving. So, what is music engraving? Music engraving is the art of drawing music notation at high quality for the purpose of mechanical reproduction. The process of engraving was to plan out the lines, spaces, and layout on a paper where the page turns were also determined. And although plate engraving had been used since the early 15th century to create visual art and maps, it was not applied to music until 1581. In this method, a mirror image of a complete page of music was engraved onto a metal plate, and ink was then applied to the grooves. After that, the metal plate would be pressed on paper. The plates could be stored and reused, which made this method an attractive option. Copper was the initial metal of choice for early plates, but by the 18th century, pewter became the standard material due to its malleability and lower costs. So up until now, everything was about the first task of the music publishers. And the second task, which is all about rights and royalties, is where things become more serious and spicy. It was in the 17th century that the concept of copyright was first developed in England. There was a lot of unlicensed printing of books and pamphlets, and in order to counter this and regulate printing, the English Parliament passed the Licensing of the Press Act in 1662, which required all intended publications to be registered with the government-approved Stationers' Company, and giving the stationers the right to regulate what material could be printed. The Stationers' Company was one of the 110 livery companies, and basically they were and are corporations under royal charter responsible for training in the respective trades as well as for the regulation of aspects such as wage control, labor conditions, and industry standards. The Stationers' Company and the Statute of Anne, enacted in 1710 in England and Scotland, provided the first legislation to protect copyright but not authors' rights. But a few years later, the Berne International Copyright Convention of 1886 finally provided protection for authors among the countries who signed the agreement, although the US did not join the Berne Convention until 1989. A few countries were pioneers of modern print and copyright laws. England was a leader in developing copyright systems, and France was ahead in developing performing rights, while Germany was the pioneering country in modern music publishing. All of this evolution sounds amazing, right? Indeed it does. But there was always a problem, and that was that the growing music publishing industry wasn't set up to favor composers. And in response, organizations like the Music Publishers Associations in the UK and later National Music Publishers Associations in the US were born. Here, the landmark Copyright Act of 1909 helped enshrine basic legal protections for composers, but the law was often conveniently overlooked or completely ignored by unethical publishers. For much of the 20th century, in fact, the situation for music creators was so bleak. Though the law granted them writing and publishing rights for their original works, all too often the only way for them to earn money was to sell their ownership of these rights away for a lump sum. And while scoring a publishing deal was once judged the greatest prize in a composer's career, the problem with traditional publishers is that the composer would lose its rights to the publisher. And compared to the amount of hours spent on each work, the payment was pretty low. And the other issue is that publishers would only promote their top composers. And if you were not on that list, your scores would probably be catching some dust and spider webs on your shelf. But hey, as I promised you, I will tell you how you can easily publish your scores and put all the traditional publishing hassles behind you. And if you're still watching, now would be a great time to hit that like or subscribe button, as it really helps me out to grow and make more content. But anyway, when I wanted to publish my scores, I searched around and was constantly looking for the best option so I could easily publish my own scores. And I found this website called Sonolize. They are a digital music publishing company based in the Netherlands, where you can intuitively make a profile and upload your scores just as you would upload your photos in Facebook or Instagram. There is also new music to download and perform by other composers and arrangers. What I like about them is that the profit is 65%, and on top of that you own the copyright, and all the royalties from the performances go right into your pocket. The fun thing is that you can add, edit, or delete scores without any need of a third party. So if you ever wanted to share your music, you can head to their website. I'll put the link in the description below. And as for this video, I really hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Till next time, Homayun out.